evolution in the fossil record, we can use the fossil record, bones and shells and hard parts that are buried in rock, to see changes over geologic time and how animals and plants have evolved over time. Whenever looking at rock samples or in a fossil record, it's always important. You'll see this a lot. The top left corner, the older material will always be at the bottom. You'll see, like down here, this shale, we have a fossil in there. As we move up, we got some limestone with a trilobite, and then a brachiopod, and then a pecten shell up here. The older material will always be at the bottom in general because that material had to be there first before we could pile more stuff on top of that. It's a law called superposition. Don't worry about that. But the deeper you dig down, the older material has to be. This shale with this fossil in here had to be here before I could put more material on top of it. It's like a snow globe. We shake it up and it settles out to the bottom. Well, all this sediment and the fossils that are in the sediment, you had to have that material there before I could stack more and more stuff on top of it. So the deeper you go when you're digging, the older the fossils are going to be. And they can see the changes in these fossils and how evolution works based upon how species gradually change over time. We see these structures, they're called homologous structures. Similar creatures will have similar types of structures, even though they're vastly different today. We have humans and horses and cats and bats and birds and whales. These all have similar structures, meaning at some point in the past, there was a common ancestor between all of these. If we look at, they all have like the ulnas, they all have the wrist bones down in here. Fingers, like in humans, they have similar structures in cats and bats and birds and whales even. They do different functions now, but they're all based upon the same principle, and just those functions over time, over millions and millions of years, the environments have influenced through natural selection how to best use those structures. But this is another key piece of evidence, these homologous structures, these similar bones and organs that a lot of creatures have, showing they share a common ancestor at some point in the past, and the function of these bones has diverged over time due to natural selection. Now, what natural selection is, this is how evolution works. Say you have like a forested area and some giraffes out here, and they get an overpopulation, and some giraffes have slightly longer necks than other giraffes. And while they're competing for food, well, the tree, the growth at the bottom of the tree gets eaten up first, and the one with the shorter neck can't reach the vegetation at the top of the tree. Now, this one in the middle here, it's not going to grow a longer neck to get there. It's just in bad shape. It's not going to be able to reach the foliage at the top of the trees anymore. And so because of that, those with the longer necks are better able to survive and move on and reproduce and have other giraffe babies that also have longer necks. Those with the shorter necks, well, they're not going to be able to survive as well. And so these guys' genes are going to start to disappear over time in favor of the longer neck giraffe. And so we see this final picture here, the middle one has disappeared completely. That's what natural selection is. And again, it's not that the animals grew a longer neck to get to the larger, the higher up vegetation, but it's just nature selected them out, saying, hey, this environment, as the environment changes, and that's what causes extinction, a change in the environment that you are no longer able to survive in, your genes, you're not going to have offspring anymore and be able to pass on your genes, where if those who are better able to survive, survival of the fittest, they're going to move on and be able to pass their genes along. And so over time, you start to see changes in the geologic record, in these fossil records, very small changes, but over millions and millions of years, it starts to become significant, where over time, you start to see major changes, over very long periods of time. And again, the changes, what causes natural selection is a change in the environment. Some are better able to adapt. We have those adaptations, things like camouflage and mimicry, those things that help birds to hide a little bit better. Some have patterns on them, like on their furs, to help them hide and become better predators. Some can hide better and and not get eaten as quickly, like rabbits. Fur will change between the summer and winter. That's called an adaptation to the environment. And so those who don't adapt, they will become extinct. And again, it's all about what's called ecological succession. Over time, the ecology is going to change. We see like a barren soil here. Well, some vegetation can't grow in barren soil, so we start to get weeds and stuff to grow up first. And as these weeds die, they add nutrients to the soil where bigger and bigger things can start to grow. And they're using the nutrients of the things that have been there before and died in the soil and been broken down by decomposers. And we start to see pine trees start to show up, and then more mature pine trees, and then finally oaks and hardwoods start to show up. So this is called ecological succession. It's a changing of the environment over time. The different types of trees start to move in as the soils become more and more mature. And as the ecology changes, the animals in there have to change as well. Say if you're, a bird, you're not going to be able to survive. There's no trees up here to hide in down here where there's just crabgrass and stuff. But as things mature along and become more complex, the organisms in there become more complex. The biomes become more complex. The animals in there have to change as well. If there's going to be a different type of animal that's going to hide in crabgrass than one that's going to hide in oak trees. They're going to eat different things down here than they're going to eat up here as the ecology changes. So this is called ecological succession again. Remember that word. And it's tied into natural selection and adaptation.